North, it's 6 o'clock. Radio Caroline North is sponsored by Feature Story News, provider of award-winning international news coverage for radio and TV stations worldwide. Find out more at featurestory.com.
Initially, thoughts turned to raising the Mi Amigo, but as time ticked by, this was obviously impractical. Over the next 3 years, rumours were rife of a new ship being fitted out.
It's Caroline. It's great to be back. The Imagination Station, Caroline.
Radio Caroline's bosses have bought a new pirate ship and they're secretly fitting it out in readiness to begin broadcasting next month. The new ship is called Imagine, is 70 meters long and is being fitted with Radio Caroline, whose pirate radio ship Mi Amigo sank last March, went back on the air at 4 p.m. yesterday from a converted freighter called John Stone. One Monday in January, Radio Caroline is set to begin broadcasting once more from a ship anchored 12 miles off Frinton on the Essex coast. 16 years ago, her arrival in the North Sea heralded some major changes in British broadcasting. Today, her backers say she's shared her pirate identity to become an international radio station poised to take on broadcasting in the 80s.
Radio Caroline. The Imagination Station.
Radio Caroline will be back with a bang on Easter Sunday. The vessel, which has been rechristened Imagine as a tribute to John Lennon, is currently being fitted out at a secret European location. The ship is 300 feet long, twice as big as the Mi Amigo, which sank, and is being completed with cabins with showers, table tennis tables, a TV lounge, and proper facilities for the crew and DJs.
Johnny Walker.
I heard news from New York that Ronan was in New York planning for a relaunch of Radio Caroline. And I thought, wow, what a fabulous way to come back to Britain, you know, if we just suddenly appear on Caroline again. So I went to New York and had a chat. And they said, yeah, brilliant, fantastic. Came back over here, got a bunch of guys together, got a load of records organised. I was just waiting for the word that the boat's ready. And all we got was excuses, oh, it's not quite ready yet, you know. And it turned out to be the usual Ronan Caroline thing, unfortunately. There was a lot of hot air and not much reality. And eventually, after spending a year and a half doing nothing and waiting for it to come back, I realised it wasn't going to, not then anyway. And I needed to get a job, so I went and got a job with my old friend Dave Cash, former Radio London DJ, and on Radio West in Bristol.
The legendary American DJ Wolfman Jack was due to broadcast on Caroline on its return in the early 80s.
Here we go, another rip-roaring hour of romance on the high seas with Wolfman Jack on Radio Caroline. In today's episode, the Wolfman goes bonkers because the music is pure zonkers. Watch him as he attempts to keep up with the rocket pace and see how it eventually ruins his face. Yes, this is Billy Squire.
A new ship is being fitted out in the northern Spanish port of Bilbao and is expected to start broadcasting near its old position off the Essex coast. Between December the 16th...
It later emerged that there was a ship, the Ross Revenge, in the Spanish port of Santander. A 300-foot mast was on her deck, and this could only mean one thing.
Radio Caroline. Music into the 80s.
Suddenly, through the mist, early morning on the 8th of August, the ship was seen passing Brighton. She dropped anchor 18 miles off the Essex coast at 7 o'clock that evening.
Today, Ronan O'Reilly is back in business, and Radio Caroline has quite literally resurfaced with a new ship anchored in international waters. The radio station will soon be broadcasting from this gigantic 300-foot mast, the tallest aerial ever built on a floating vessel. With the station pumping out rock music at 50,000 watts, Caroline's signal will be as clear as its message.
But the point behind it, have you listened to the radio in Britain lately? That's the point behind it. We're doing what no one else is doing. We're going to be playing a lot of music and very little chat, which isn't difficult to do, really. what people want to listen in radio isn't there. There's a radio market and a radio feel that isn't there at the moment. I mean, who wants to listen to inane chat? I mean, people spend thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever, making good music with the technical expertise that's available. Do you need it broken up with chat? No, I certainly don't.
The Marine Broadcasting Offences Act, which came into effect 16 years ago this week, tried to make it illegal to broadcast from radio ships like this. Anyone found repairing, supplying, installing, maintaining radio equipment like this is liable to prosecution, but only if they're operating from Britain. Ronan O'Reilly is getting all the food and equipment for his radio station from Europe. But the threat of legal action remains for anyone committing a whole host of offences that might generally be described as aiding and abetting these pirate broadcasters.
You know, we supply from Spain, and, you know, we have international advertising. Our head office is in Los Angeles and New York, and the station is run in strict compliance with all of the local legislations in the various European countries.
Now, since the introduction of independent local radio in the UK, of course, people have been able to advertise on British radio. Doesn't that mean that there's less of a need for stations like Radio Caroline?
Well, of course, the beauty of Caroline is that it's totally a relationship between this station and the audience, and the audience is the absolute decision maker. And if the audience don't want to listen to us, if nobody wants to listen, then there's no ball game. But we've never had that problem.
You think you can still be profitable?
Well, I think we can have an enormous audience, and if you have an enormous audience, there's an enormous number of international advertisers who are very enthusiastic about using us.
Listen to Radio Caroline on 319. Sound of Radio Caroline will be unashamedly of the 60s and early 70s. Its philosophy, they say, will be one of loving awareness. If loving awareness proves popular, the audience will be measured in millions, and Radio Caroline's American backers will be laughing all the way to the Dogger Bank.
Within a few days, test transmissions had started, and reports showed the signal was being heard over a wide area. Music tests followed in preparation for the station's opening on Saturday, the 20th of August, 1983. You're listening to a test transmission from Radio Caroline on 319 meters, 963 kilohertz. Our programs commence at 12 noon tomorrow.
Test transmission from Radio Caroline on 319 meters, 963 kilohertz. Our programs commence at 12 noon tomorrow. You're listening to a test transmission from Radio Caroline on 319 meters, 963 kilohertz. Our programs commence in precisely 9 minutes' time.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Radio Caroline on 319 meters, 963 kilohertz. I'm Tom, and for the next hour, I'd like to take you on a couple of musical journeys through the past 2 decades. We're going to start with the Zombies and She's Not There, and follow that with the Yardbirds with Heart Full of Soul. Caroline on 319. It's 2:45, and from myself, Tom Anderson, that's it from me. We're going out with Roxy Music, then the Psychedelic Furs, and finally, we're going to have a little bit of John Lennon. After that, Andy Archer will be along to play some more music for you.
On 319 meters, with love, peace, and good music.
What can I say? A nice day. It's about 23 degrees out here. The sea isn't too bad, not unpleasant at the moment. And thank you very much indeed for all the people who came out to see us, and especially to Buster and Jean and Don and Teo, also Norbert and Chris and Keith and Paul, also John and Steve. Thanks for the champagne. I'd like to say hello to John Underwood and Sebastian and all the crowd from ITN. Nice to see you. Also the crowd from TVAM, and not forgetting Anglia Television, and Dave Kindred for all the support from the East Anglian Daily Times. We have an address which I'll give you in a moment. Before then, let me tell you we played Flash's Groove Thang from Heaven 17, The Pretenders back on the Chain Gang, The Beatles with Hello Goodbye, Tom Robinson sang War Babies, Steve Miller with Fly Like an Eagle, and Joni Mitchell in France They Kiss on Main Street. That address is Radio Caroline, Postbox 69504, Los Angeles 90069. The address once more, Radio Caroline, Postbox 69504, Los Angeles 90069. It's Caroline on 319 OM.
This is Europe's first and only album station, Radio Caroline.
The ship had been off the air for about 3 years, and suddenly it came back with a bang, a really loud, powerful signal, and loads of boats from Essex and Kent came out to say hello, and it was really gratifying to know we had their support. At another level, I was a little disappointed because technically we weren't really ready to go on the air. We had the transmitter working okay, and the signal was first class. But unfortunately, we only had 2 turntables and the microphone operational in the studio. By mid-September 1983, Caroline had started a news service. And it was around this time also that other DJs joined the station.
Peter Clark, Simon Barrett, Carl Kingston, Grant Benson, Scotty, Peter Quinn, Robin Ross, Andy Archer, Dixie Peach, Tom Anderson.
Jockey Peter Clark remembers his time on the Ross Revenge.
The ship was a lot larger than I thought. I was expecting it to perhaps be a bit smaller, but it certainly was a large ship, and it was about 25 years old, so it wasn't in too bad a shape. And I'd seen pictures of the Mi Amigo, which looked a bit tatty. So, although, of course, the Mi Amigo is one of the forerunners of pirate radio, I was quite pleased that it was a newer ship. And we all got on quite well, all the crew. We didn't have any sort of any problems at all. We had, when I went on, I think there was 9 fellas, and also Carol, who was Peter Chicago's girlfriend. She was there as well. And, of course, the famous Raffles the dog. And we all got on famously.
Difficult times still lay ahead. Advertising promised shortly after the station went on the air was slow to materialize.
This is Caroline.
It's 3 o'clock, you're listening to Radio Caroline, and look at the weather. The remainder of the afternoon is going to be dry. There are going to be some sunny intervals, but it's going to be noticeably cooler than of late, and a maximum temperature of 13 degrees Celsius. Tonight it's going to be cloudy, some showers for those of you that are living in the east, and temperatures around 6 degrees.
319 meters, 963 kilohertz. This is Radio Caroline. On behalf of our chief engineer, I'd like to apologize for our absence today. This was due to essential aerial maintenance work, which could only be carried out during daylight hours. And we'd like to thank you for retuning to 319.
Radio Caroline.
On Friday, the 27th of January, 1984, the first long-awaited commercials went on the air.
Skaters, don't slip up and sit on the sidelines wishing and watching. Do you want to skate with the style and confidence of a champion? Then start feet first and jump into a pair of WIFA skating boots. WIFA make boots for all skaters, from beginners to Olympic and world champions. Join the exciting and glamorous world of ice skating in a pair of WIFA boots. The skates that put the poetry in motion.
You've got the look, you've got the look. You've got the look, you've got the look. You've got the look, I want to know better. You've got the look that's all together. Working, playing, day or night. Jordache has the fit that's right.
Fantastic. What a fit. Jordache jeans. That's what's different. Look at that Jordache cut, that Jordache quality. Right now, I don't know what I like best about you. The way you look or the way you look in your Jordache jeans. You've got the look.
You've got the look. I want to know better. You've got the look that's all together. Jordache has the fit that's right. Jordache look, Jordache look, Jordache look.
Radio Caroline on a Saturday afternoon. Good afternoon. This is McKenna with you till 6 o'clock, and thank you to Ivy Benson for the first couple of minutes playing my records for me. You know, I was sitting downstairs and I thought, oh, it's all right, I've got a couple of minutes to go. I ran up here and the clock said just after 3 because the one downstairs is wrong. A little bit of a rush this afternoon. We heard James Taylor, how sweet it is, David Bowie, and you heard that first on Caroline, with Blue Jean and Mr. Blue Sky from ELO, all at 11 minutes past 3.
At the end of the year, Caroline
Caroline had formed a partnership with a new Dutch offshore station. And in December, Caroline conducted tests on 576 kilohertz in preparation for daytime programming for Radio Caroline. Meanwhile, on 963 kilohertz, the new Dutch station Radio Monique was informing listeners of its impending arrival.
Het is bijna 11:10. U luistert naar Radio Monique.
American evangelism returned once again in May 1985, when the Foundation of Human Understanding booked an hour of airtime Monday to Friday evening on 963 kilohertz, and Roy Masters is heard once again.
Hello, Roy Masters speaking, you're on the air.
This soon led to many of the previous American evangelists, also heard during the 70s, to book airtime in the evenings, and these programs became known as Viewpoint 963.
Steps to Reality is produced by Christian Fellowship Church. Please address your mail to Steps to Reality, L.R. Davis, Pastor, Post Office Box 5720, Chicago, Illinois, zip code 60680.
This is Caroline, that was Paul Young, and everything must change. And I just hope that Jim Reynolds, who lives in Orpington in Kent, is listening in. He's got a sauna in Orpington High Street called the Health Studio. And I should be telling you more about that from a letter we've had from a satisfied customer who's heard Radio Caroline on there. That'll be coming up all between 10 and 11 o'clock this morning.
It will be magnificent. A piece of the future to taste, to see, to touch. Set among the mountains of Canada's beautiful Pacific coast in the heart of a thriving metropolitan city. It is Expo 86. The World Exposition will be held in Vancouver, Canada from May 2nd to October 13th, 1986. More than 40 nations will celebrate mankind's global achievements in transportation and communication. Expo 86 will feature over 80 pavilions and international exhibits from countries including the People's Republic of China, the USSR, and the USA. The World Exposition site will spread over 173 acres along 2.5 miles of Pacific coastline. All of it amidst the splendor that is supernatural British Columbia. In your lifetime, you may never again have the chance to experience an event like this in a place like this. Expo 86. Don't miss it for the world. Inquire at Tourism British Columbia House, Regent Street, London, or call your travel agent.
Live from the North Sea on 576, this is Caroline International. Time now 1 minute past 10 o'clock. You with the Jay Jackson program on Sunday, the 20th of January, 1985. Here's a hit. It's Alison Moyer. Invisible.
Experience the magic of Morocco, where East meets West in style. Morocco, with 2,000 miles of untamed beaches. And it's on one of these beaches you'll discover a holiday village called Arabian Sands. At the Arabian Sands Holiday Village, you'll enjoy African sunshine at Costa Brava prices. Appealing to sun seekers of all ages, your village is located next to the famous Caves of Hercules on the northwest tip of Africa, where the Med meets the Atlantic. For young or old, it's a holiday of a lifetime. And it's all yours from just £199 sterling for 2 long, sun-drenched weeks. And you can take one child under 12 free. Ask your travel agent for a brochure or call London 631-5083. London 631-5083. For further information, write to Box C, Arabian Sands, 3 Post 4, London W1E 4UZ.
Right now, in Canada, in the new world, in the land of opportunity, people are winning tax-free. A fortune. The prize is £1 million a week. £1 million minimum. It's called Lotto 649, and now you can play and win.
choose any 6 numbers between 1 and 49 inclusive.
42, 36, 16, 27, 49.
Write down your 6 numbers and your name and address and send them with 15 pounds cash, check, or money order to Bet Canada. Your 6 numbers will be entered in Lotto 649 in each week for 13 consecutive weeks after receipt. By return mail, you'll receive notification of your official entry date. Lotto 649 is one of the world's largest lotteries. In 10 years, over 200 million people have won a total of over 1 billion pounds. Every week, Lotto 649 draws 6 numbers. If you choose 3 of them, you win 6 pounds. If you choose 4 or more, you win a share of the total prize. Maybe 1,000 pounds, maybe 100,000 pounds. Once the grand prize reaches 8 million pounds. Enter Lotto 649 now. Select 6 numbers between 1 and 49. Send them with your name and address and 15 pounds cash, check, or money order to Bet Canada, Box 48649, Vancouver, Canada, V7X1A3. Bet Canada, Box 48649, Vancouver, Canada, V7X1A3. Then all day Saturday, stay tuned to Radio Caroline News for winning numbers and 649 information. Right now, in Canada, people are winning tax-free a fortune. Lotto 649. Enter now and prepare to get rich.
Lotto 649 is operated by the Government of Canada.
Terry Jacks and Seasons in the Sun. Before that, of course, Phil Bailey and Phil Collins, Easy Lover, and Roxy Music, Love is the Drug. I just went through and told Martin that he was playing Wally in the first round, and I think I've just learnt my first Dutch swear word. And it's back downstairs we go now. I am, thank you. Sorry, I was talking to Raffles, actually. Thank you, Johnny.
Raffles is up on the table.
Yeah.
Raffles, you know you shouldn't be there. Actually, he's looking very fierce at the moment. Dad, and the darts competition is in full swing here. Yawn. So we've got Bilbo and Susan still playing after about 15 minutes. We've had some...
They get the ball yet?
Yes, we've had some low scores. 11, but that's not the lowest. 11 from Bilbo, but we've had a 6 from Susan, which has also got the highest score of 96.
Well, I tell you, I must admit, I was listening in a couple of minutes ago and I heard somebody shout out something like 63, and I thought, well, that's not bad for a 1 score, is it? And then found out it was the grand total after about 30 throws.
There it was, yes. But anyway, you're both looking for doubles, aren't you, at the moment? Yeah, what are you on, Bilbo?
Double 4.
You're on double 4. What's Susan on? Oh, she's throwing at the moment.
13.
You're on double 13?
Double 6. Double 6. You shouldn't have told her that, Skip.
Go on, throw it. Only get 1. Double 6. Nearly, treble 13. Anyway, we're going to give away one more top 500 poster right now. And the top 500 poster actually is going to G. McSweeney at 143 Woodbourne Street in Glasgow. So thanks very much for your birthday card. They sent us a birthday card, or she, it could be she actually, couldn't it? Could be. G, anyway. G. Says here, on your birthday, eat beans and enjoy a good birthday party. Actually, there's a letter here crossed out, but I can't absolutely the words. It's Sunday afternoon. Yes, indeed.
Some of the news now down with, or even down, I can't get the teeth in right the right way. Should we just say, shut up and get on with it, Sully? Live from the North Sea on 576 kilohertz, this is Radio Caroline International. The time is exactly 5 o'clock.
Radio Caroline News, brought to you by Newsweek magazine.
The new military ruler of Sudan has appointed a cabinet. It comprises 9 military officers and 3 civilians. And some sports. Tomorrow's race meeting at Newton Abbot has been called off. The course there is waterlogged. For Caroline, I'm Jay Jackson.
That was Radio Caroline News, brought to you by Newsweek, the international news magazine.
In June, a new service is heard nightly between 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. Jamming 963 featured soul and reggae music.
Beautiful music on the Saturday evening, Jamming 963. There's a beautiful little reggae sound by Joe Bennett. A Okay, if you have a request or a dedication like us to play for you here on Jamming 963, drop a line to Jamming 963 New York 11518 USA. In our state, the guy called Eddie Murphy. Why? I don't know. Anyway, let's take a look and tell you what's happening. All we want is a chance for you to win yourself £50 worth of records, reggae, soul, and jazz records.
Peter Phillips explains the reasons behind Caroline's format change in 1985 and how he became program controller.
The station, you may remember, had lost its way, really, musically. It was partly what you might term an album station, which is fine, but it was also partly, I don't know, lots of club music and dub reggae music, and it didn't work on medium wave. I'm all for a bit of reggae, but the sort of stuff that you listen to on a big hi-fi, the sort of stuff that can displace vital organs if you listen to it at the right volume, does not work on medium wave, or so I believed. And I was, when I came off on shore leave, I was sitting in a bar with Tom Anderson, and I was having this discussion with him, because I think he was probably slightly keener on the reggae than I was. And I was saying pretty much to him what I'm saying to you now, that I didn't think it was working. And all of a sudden, Ronan walked in, and he said, and this was the first time I'd met Ronan, and we were introduced, and he said, well, so what do you think of the station? And I'm not normally perhaps quite as forthright as that, but having just said my piece, it seemed silly not to say it again, so I just said, I think it's rubbish. I said, I think it's lost its way. And he said, I completely agree. He said, what would you do about it? And I said very much to him what I just said to Tom Anderson, that I thought that some of the music we were playing wasn't working, and that we should take a slightly more commercial approach and a more professional approach to the presentation and so forth. And he said, I completely agree. Again, he said, would you like to do something about it? And that's how I became the program controller, really. I sort of talked myself into it, really.
In August, a government surveillance vessel, the Dioptric Surveyor, moored between the Laser and the Caroline ships in an attempt to observe supplies being brought out to the two ships. In an effort to determine which radio ship the authorities were interested in, the Laser ship, the MV Communicator, upped anchor and sailed to another location. But it was clear that the authorities were far more interested in the Laser organization than that of Caroline.
Okay, special report to the Situations Room concerning the Euro siege, as we are in day 23. We thought something was going on. We're not quite sure. Some of the lights went out on their boat, but they still have power, I guess, because their radar antenna is still going on the Dioptric Surveyor, and some of the lights are on, but a lot of the navigation lights are off. And we I don't know what to make of it, but and especially their anchor light, very important stuff. Any ships should be in our area. Please be careful. The Dioptric Surveyor is sitting between the Ross Revenge and the Communicator, which is our ship. So if there's any oil tankers coming on through and you plan on passing through the two ships, be careful, because the Dioptric is there. And I'd sure hate to see you go and around those guys, because they're friends. You know what I mean?
17 minutes past the hour now. This is Craig Novak, and a special message now. Well, let me tell you, for those who might be interested, Yankee 3 is 0. Uniform, repeat uniform, Romeo 2, repeat Romeo 2. November, repeat November, channel 16 listening. 14 before the hour, Laser 558. Repetition of this fine message. We have all Yankee 3 are 0. Uniform, repeat uniform, November, repeat November, Romeo 2, repeat Romeo 2, channel 16 listening.
Here's a list of some of the things you could be doing on Sunday, November 2nd, instead of going to the last Brighton Records Fair of 1986. Cutting the grass, watching John Wayne win World War II in black and white, or going round to Uncle Henry's for tea. However, if you go to the Brighton Records Fair, you could pick up that Little Feat album you've always wanted, or save pounds on Madonna's latest waxing, or find a rare video of Bob Marley in concert. The possibilities are endless, because the Brighton Records Fair is the biggest of its kind in Europe. The Brighton Records Fair, 10:30 a.m. until 5 o'clock on November 2nd at the Brighton Centre, Kings Road, Brighton.
Peter explains about the move to 558.
I'm quite confident that we benefited to some some extent from what you might term their inheritance. Also, I mean, the other benefit of being on 558 is that at the time it was a far and away better frequency. You could put out the same power on 558 and go twice as far. It was marvellous. You didn't get any nighttime interference. It's no longer quite like that because there's more stations have come on, but at the time it was a clear channel. And it really went. But I suppose we'd had our eye on that channel for some while, but we had made the decision that there was absolutely no question of jumping in until we were absolutely certain that Laser didn't want it anymore. I mean, we weren't in the business of starting any sort of conflict, and we were on very good terms with Laser anyway. We liked the idea of having another station out there. It was quite neighbourly, and we certainly weren't going to get involved in the dispute, but they went in. I mean, there was no question that at the time when we took that channel, they no longer needed it. We waited long enough. Every time they went off with their mast down, we waited for them. We didn't snatch it in the way that we could have done. But when they packed up and cleared off, that was a good time to take it. It would have been silly, because if we hadn't, somebody else would. I mean, obviously there were other stations who were interested in it, and it would have been silly to let them have it. So at that stage, we moved fairly quickly. We were up all night that night rearranging the aerial, and the following day, we were ready to go.
14 minutes past 7 o'clock on Thursday morning from Caroline. On 558, you just heard the music of Sade, the sweetest taboo, and Nikita, it's old Elton John. Still going? Good, Riley. Now, it may seem like the middle of the night to you. In fact, I'm sure if I wasn't doing this early shift, it would probably, this time of the morning, it would seem pretty early to me as well, middle of the night. But it is light. And half the world is up and working at the moment. And half the world's children are delivering papers as well through your letterbox. Do you not feel guilty just laying in bed, sipping tea and eating rich tea biscuits?
When turning on the good times, remember to take a generous supply of Hawaiian Tropic. Stay a little longer, a little safer, and a little darker with Hawaiian Tropic.
Just having a quick look at the newspapers. I see the Sun still has a page 3. Surprises me, but it's now 8:21. Good morning from Dave Owen and everyone on board Caroline. If you'd like us to say good morning to you, one morning on 558, do drop us a line. Our address is Caroline, 558, New York 11518 USA. We'll drop a bottle of joy. 8:26 in Pomona Dome. We are All Music Radio. We're Caroline, 558.
Details, call your local travel agent or Singapore Airlines.
Now, this is the sort of record you should your cornflakes. Come in and do for the music, man. Here's Diana. Caroline. If you're not going into work today, maybe you're getting into work late. I'm Caroline 558 between 9 and 1 this morning. Feed us for them. Your best music station. We're Caroline. Good to be with me.
It was on November the 6th that Laser 558 finally closed down.
It's 12 o'clock midday. Radio Caroline News, brought to you by Newsweek magazine.
Good afternoon. The offshore radio ship MB Communicator, home of Laser 558, sailed from the Noctib Channel today, escorted by the British government surveillance vessel Guardline Tracker. The communicator had been plagued by generator problems since yesterday, and after a night of heavy storms on the North Sea, the government vessel took up position alongside the ship earlier today. It isn't yet known if the communicator had asked for assistance or if the authorities boarded the vessel. Both ships are now believed to be heading for Harwich on the east coast of England. The crew of the Guardline Tracker would not comment on whether or not the action they had taken was on the authorization of land-based officials. With a look back at Laser's time on the North Sea, Andy Johnson.
Laser 558 was one of the most successful offshore radio stations to challenge Europe's land-based broadcasters since the first such station took to the high seas in 1958. Its programs of non-stop hit music at one time had an audience of over 8 million listeners, but from the time Laser arrived off the east coast of England until today, the station was plagued with technical problems. The original plan to broadcast using an aerial suspended from a balloon flown above the radio ship Communicator, previously a surveillance vessel called Guardline Seeker, was soon abandoned in favour of the more traditional transmitter masts. And despite its massive audience, Laser never achieved the same measure of success in gaining advertising. Nevertheless, the station was seen as such a threat by Britain's independent local radio operators, who found their listeners deserting in droves to the brash American newcomer, that they put pressure on the UK government to silence both Laser and her neighbour Caroline. The government surveillance vessel took up station in the not-deep channel of the North Sea, where both ships are anchored. The authorities claimed both stations were supplied from England in contravention of legislation passed in 1967, designed to silence offshore radio once and for all. In fact, both Laser and Caroline tendered from Spain. Last night's storms, coupled with a lack of cash and ever-increasing generator problems, finally proved too much, and Laser's brave attempt to shake up European broadcasting came to an end. It is ironical that the government ship Guardline Tracker, which escorted Laser to Harwich, was once upon a time her sister ship to the Communicator.
On the 15th of December, the Eurosiege surveillance was finally called off. New Year's Eve saw the start of a new rock music service, Overdrive.
And now, throughout the night on 963 kilohertz, this is Caroline Overdrive. Europe's heartbeat of music, the legend lives on. Radio Caroline. On 558 kilohertz, this is Radio Caroline. Caroline 558 is 6 minutes to 10. Got to say hello to Les Smith, who's written to us from Red Hill in Surrey. Said he'd like us to say hello to everybody at the Bell in Reigate. So hello to everybody at the Bell. Also got to say hello to Dennis. Hope that covers that one for you. Back to the 70s all the way now for Earth, Wind and Fire in the Zone. Caroline 558.
By the spring of 1987, Caroline's all-hit format on 558 was now attracting a large audience and was voted third most popular radio station in the Greater London area by the Record Mirror. And due to an increase in airtime at night of the Viewpoint programmes, the Overdrive service came to an end.
Whatever it turns you on, I suppose, 11:15, Caroline 558. Some of the music coming up between now and midday includes The Pretenders, The Blow Monkeys, Level 42, Don Henley, and many, many more. Good old Brad Miller, stocking it right up the end of your car.
The Ross Revenge moved in June 87. Peter explains why.
The law changed. We couldn't stay where we were. We would have been very happy to stay in the Not Deep. It was a better anchorage and more secluded. But they redrew the boundary of Great Britain under whatever international authority they had to do that. I couldn't say. I'm no authority, but I do know that the law changed and that we decided not to fight it, but simply to move.
Beautifully flat, calm day out here on the North Sea at the moment. Looking forward to getting into some serious sunbathing if the haze lifts. Just a little misty at the moment. 6:38 is the time. That's 22 minutes to 7 you push. With the tourist back in 1979. And don't say I told you so. On 558 kilohertz, this is Radio Caroline. And Roberts, you've managed to hook my needle in your video camera lens. Gosh! Oh, what? Thank you so much. 6 minutes after 9 o'clock, Caroline 558. Hello, Kenny. Good morning to you. Please turn around until 1 o'clock with more of Europe's favourite music, and now with Genesis.
In October 1987, a hurricane hits the south of England. What was it like on board the Ross Revenge?
I was on the breakfast show that morning, and Mike Watts was the engineer on board. And he came banging on the cabin door at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "You better get up." And I looked at my watch, and I said, Well, you know what I might have said, and go away is the gist of it. And he said, no. He said, never mind the program. He said, there's a hurricane going on out there. And people have said to me since it must have been terribly rough out there, and it wasn't anything of the sort. I mean, I'd never known such a calm day. It was like being back at the Knock Deep. It was flat as could be. I didn't believe it. I got out of bed, and of course, once you actually looked out of the porthole, it was quite clear there was a hurricane going on. There was a lot of water going past, and you couldn't see a thing apart from water. It was almost as if we'd sunk. There was so much water outside, flying past the window, porthole. And what was happening, of course, was that we were being held like a kite, tight on the anchor chain. We weren't moving, we weren't rotating with the tide or anything. We were just being held absolutely solid. When the wind dropped, that was when we started to move. Later on in the day, when we really did start to take a bit of the swell, and we started to rotate into it. But at the time, all it was just very, very windy.
Caroline 558 from the North Sea, which takes the form of a seething cauldron of saline hostility. Friday morning is looking to get its worst. 7, that is impressive. It's your favourite music. The village clinging on to dear light here. This music coming from the Go-Go's over our lips sea.
But that must have done some damage. I mean, for all of the fact that it wasn't too painful to live through, it certainly stretched the feed wires. We actually had to go off the air later that afternoon because the feed wires were yards longer than they had been. Copper really stretches, and they were flapping about like nobody's business. We just had to go out and cut a couple of yards out of them and tighten them up again. And also, of course, there had been some damage to the rigging, which had also taken a bit of a pounding during that hurricane. And when we inspected it a day or two later, when we actually could get out there to have a look at it, it became clear that the really big insulators at the sides of the mast, as you'll be aware, the mast is held up by rigging which at intervals contains loops, and inside those loops are threaded big porcelain insulators so as to stop huge currents building up in the wires. And those really big porcelain insulators at the sides had actually cracked and were crumbling, and bits of them had fallen onto the deck. And we asked if somebody on shore would please send us some new insulators and some new wires so we could remake those stays. And we waited and we waited and we asked again, and we said, this is really rather important, and they sent a word back saying, yes, that's all very well, but they're also really rather expensive. And that was the stalemate, the fact that we said we wanted them and they said we couldn't have them. And clearly, I mean, if we'd had them, we would have stuck them in. And we shall never know precisely why the mast came down. There's a number of theories as to what might have caused it, but my personal theory as to why the mast fell down is that the next time the ship started rolling, the give in those wires caused by the crumbling insulators was just too much, and the thing just folded up and fell down. And I shall believe that until somebody proves to me different.
Caroline 558 plays the best in new music. Listen this week for Squeeze, Trust Me to Open My Mouth. On the rock, drop play. Just a few of the great new sounds you can hear this week on Europe's better music station.
Caroline 558 is now 28 minutes past 7.
This morning's top story. Winds are up to 110 miles an hour has caused havoc across the southern half of the UK. And Scotland Yard have released details of further charges in the Guinness affair. Full details at 8.
Here's Annika Charles breakfast.
I've just been running halfway around the ship.
Same reason as me. We've just been looking at a piece of wire that appears to have come adrift on our mast, which is bad news, but we'll see if we can fix it. But you're still on the air. Meanwhile, I'll give you the weather prospects for today. Showers and sunny spells and an awful lot of wind about top to 15 Celsius. The wind is south-southwest and strong to hurricane force. State of the sea, starfall heading into rough, and the visibility from the Ross Revenge is poor. We're Caroline 558 to the track.
Disaster struck the Ross Revenge during the night of November the 25th, when the 300-foot tower collapsed during a storm.
Caroline, 5 confirmation of the weather on this Wednesday,
Celine Strong said the South Pole is rough. I should think so too. And the visibility from the Ross Revenge is good. Affirmative touch. Caroline 558. New York 11518 in USA if you'd like to write to us. New York 11518 in USA if you'd like to write to us. That's where you want to write. And send us a letter or something. This is ridiculous. Here's the Hooters on Caroline 558 with Satellite. Good morning to you.
There was nothing left of the tower. The station returned to the air on the 3rd of December with a makeshift aerial system.
And a very, very good afternoon to you, just as you were beginning to think we'd gone away. We pop back to Caroline 558, back on your radio, back with all the good music across Europe. And the music never stops. It's full west and we close our eyes. We all did a lot of last week. Good afternoon to you. It's Hardy Harris, by the way. Europe's favourite music station, Caroline 558, back in business yet again. At 90 minutes past 2, Barry White still going strong, so I think. It's the 4th of December today. When you're off the air, you lose all track of time. Christmas is nearly here. Sing.
Shirley and Company and Shame. It's, well, it is a big shame, actually. It's coming up to 10 to 1, and you'd all be expecting Richard Jackson after 1 o'clock, but he's gone back to bed again. This is the drag. Keith Lewis had originally volunteered to stand in. Very big of him, I thought. Richard Jackson said, no, it's all right. I'll do it. Fine. He's gone back to bed. He's too ill. Poor guy. He did go through it a bit last night. He got right through it. About 15 bottles, I think. It's a rager.
In July, following the rebuilding of the aerial system, Caroline 558 handed over the daytime hours to the new Dutch station Radio 558, with Caroline being heard only at night time.
You're listening to Caroline 558, your 24-hour music station. In order to carry out essential engineering and technical reorganization to bring you a better service on 558 and a new station on 819, it's necessary for Caroline to suspend daytime transmission from Saturday for a period of about 1 month. After this time, Caroline will return to 558 24 hours with a better service than ever before. During the next month, a Dutch language music station can be heard on 558 during the day, with Caroline continuing unaltered throughout the night. So stay tuned to 558 for the best 24-hour music radio. Roll begins in 5 minutes' time. This is for Jeanette from Steve, Erwin van der Bleek in Dutch next. See you at 6. Bye-bye.
The Dutch organisation lost their radio station from the moment the big tower came down. And of course, when we got a very small signal back on the air, there was no point in relaying Monique because the signal wasn't reaching Holland anyway. It wasn't until Chicago's second attempt with the Versa Tower and the homemade front tower that we got a signal into Holland. Now, what we should have done at that stage, in my opinion, was to instantly abandon Caroline, at least for the moment, and give the Dutch what they wanted, because they were still running the long-range tenders, they were bringing the fuel, they were bringing the food. And I'm just amazed that they kept doing that month after month without hearing anything of their own radio station. But eventually they rebelled, and it was clear that they weren't going to play ball any longer until they got a signal. And so this hybrid arrangement was made that they would have Caroline during the day, Monique during the day and Caroline during the night.
In November, things returned to normal, with Caroline returning to daytimes on 558 and once again becoming a 24-hour operation. The Dutch service was renamed Radio 819 and moved to that frequency together with the Viewpoint programs.
On midday today, Europe's premier music station is back all day long in English. Caroline 558 plays your favourite music and more of it than anyone else on 558 AM.
558 plays the best Indian music. Listen this week to the new single from Black. Just some of the great new sounds you can hear all this week on Europe's better music station.
A new overnight service started in January 1989. Called Caroline 819, the overnight alternative, it featured classic rock tracks, Disaster once again struck the Ross Revenge when on August the 19th, 1989, in a combined effort between the Dutch and British authorities, a raid is mounted on the Ross Revenge.
Anybody hearing this broadcast perhaps could help us by telephoning the Coast Guard to register a complaint, possibly by contacting anybody in authority that you think could help us. This is the radio ship Ross Revenge, broadcasting from the international waters of the North Sea. And for the moment anyway, we'll return you to our regular programs. Thank you.
It appears that we are now being boarded by a Dutch tug. We are being boarded by a Dutch tug.
The representatives of the Dutch government have just boarded the Ross Revenge. At the moment, one of the people that's still aboard has been violent towards our engineer. We haven't a clue what's going on at the moment.
All we can say is these guys are definitely not here to take photographs.
No, and at the moment we have the DTI standing by at the rear of the ship. They are not at this stage appearing to do anything. We're going to make inquiries whether or not they are going to allow this behaviour. As I say, there has been some violence, and it's on behalf of it's the Dutch people that have been doing it. We'll get back to you.
After only 6 weeks, the station returns to the air, but the Dutch service, Radio 819, decided not to recommence broadcasting and ceased operation.
Again, Caroline 558 broadcasting live from the international waters of the North Sea. Back once again for quite some considerable time this time round. We'll be together. You know that you can bet you for very long. We'd like to thank you all for your presence aboard. We wouldn't have been able to carry on without you, Dave Escher. Keep hearing from you, thanks.
I might say hello. Don't forget to tell your friends that we're back on the air again. Obviously, when we go off the air in such a way, we get loads of publicity, and that will understand the publicity to be told that we're back on the air.
Listen up, right here waiting for you.
On 558 kilohertz, this is Radio Caroline. Caroline International News, brought to you by Newsweek magazine.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock, I'm Nick Jackson. In June 1990, the then IBA allocated the frequency of 558 to a London ILR station, Spectrum International, and a battle for the frequency then began.
I was surprised when the ship went back on the air that nothing happened either to the ship or to me, because my identity was known by then. Had I known better, I would have realised that there was legislation in the pipeline to deal with the problem, as the authorities saw it. So there was no point at that moment in chasing us about. But of course we had a very weak signal, and the IBA decided to allocate 558 to another station, with the promise to that station that Caroline wouldn't be a problem because A, our signal was very weak, and B, steps were going to be taken to get rid of us once and for all. But coincidentally, just as the decision was taken to give 558 to Spectrum Radio, we managed to obtain some new output valves and quadrupled our transmitter power, and that set off this bizarre frequency battle between ourselves and Spectrum. Now, had I been given the opportunity, I would have moved channel to make us look like the good boys and go on to 576. But Ronan was adamant that 558 was his, and we would battle it through to the end. And I don't think it really did us a lot of good in the sense of PR, and gave the authorities the opportunity to say, well, look, this terrible pirate station is jamming out Spectrum Radio, when in fact the confrontation had been engineered by the authorities in the first place.
Caroline was forced to change frequency. How did this happen?
I think that was British Chicago. We did try and move on to 576, and we managed to blow something up in the process, which is why we were off the air for a while. But all through that time, from the raid onwards, the station was gradually going downhill, both in terms of crewing, quality of DJs, and the sort of materials we could get on board. From having an overseas fuel tender, which once put 100 tons of diesel on in one go, we were down to using a 28-foot trawler, or even sometimes a rubber boat with oil barrels, and fueling the ship up in that way. But it's only because we had a reserve that we lasted as long as we did. But effectively, we were blockaded, and when the authorities decided to act against the British tenders, the situation became ridiculous that we were running back and forth perhaps 120 miles round trip from the River Medway in a rubber boat, sometimes a single-engined one, just to get the minimum amount of supplies on board. And looking back now, what we did was near suicidal. It was complete madness.
During October, Caroline is forced to give up using 558 and return to 819 kilohertz.
It's Saturday morning, the 6th of October, with Radio Caroline into her 4th decade of doing no more than bringing entertainment and enjoyment to millions of people. And why not? Track 10, Radio Caroline on a rather lumpy North Sea. And a very good morning to our very own new kids on the block. I trust the two of you are very well and looking after each other. As you do. Here's Madonna for you. This is Rose.
Approaching 3 minutes after 1 o'clock, you've been listening to Radio Caroline, broadcasting live from the radio ship Ross Revenge, anchored in the international waters of the North Sea on 819 kilohertz AM. Radio Caroline is now closing down. Transmissions resume at 6 o'clock in the morning, where you can join Rico on the breakfast show. On behalf of everyone aboard the Ross Revenge, this is Neil Gaines wishing you a very good night.
In November, the station ran out of supplies and finally went off the air. The skeleton crew were forced to abandon the ship due to a power failure and were all later rescued by an RAF helicopter.
Basically blockaded out of every item we needed to continue to operate the ship with. We had no fuel, we had no materials. We put on board, some months before, a couple of very small single-cylinder Ducati generators, which I thought could be used just to keep the ship's services going. So I really knew we were going to go off the air. Now, Peter Chicago was very dismissive of these generators when he saw them and simply left them on deck, which was his manner. And of course, both of them seized up through salt corrosion. We managed to get one operating. But we got down to a stage of running these generators on waste oil, which had a certain element of contaminated diesel mixed in with it. And the procedure was to start the engines using ether or easy start and then feed them this waste oil once they're up to running temperature. And for a long time, that's how the ship was lit, by using contaminated oil out of the waste oil bunkers. And eventually, of course, both engines were destroyed. And if you look at the ship, the record library these days, you will still see above the portholes little marks where the paint is charred from where candles were put in the windows as an absolute last-ditch attempt to keep the ship lit, which obviously was insanity to operate a ship at sea like that. But that's what we were reduced to in the last few weeks.
It's 1991, and the Ross Revenge sits silently at her moorings. The new 1990 Broadcasting Act is now law, and with added new powers to the 1967 Marine Offences Act, it gave the authorities the right to board and to seize any radio ship in international waters. In April, Caroline was heard on the Astra satellite across Europe. November, and once again Caroline loses yet another anchor, but this time with greater consequence. After a night of severe storms on the North Sea, the Ross Revenge ran onto the notorious Goodwin Sands, and all of the crew were gallantly rescued by a helicopter from RAF Manston. The ship was abandoned to the elements and was considered to be a total loss. But after several days, she was towed off and salvaged by tugs from the Dover Harbour Board. How did Peter hear about this disaster?
My first knowledge was when I was telephoned at about 5 in the morning to say the ship had gone aground on the Goodwin Sands and had in fact capsized. And I thought at that stage that there was a high probability that we'd killed or drowned 6 crew members, because ships that go on the Goodwin Sands do not tend to last very long, particularly when they go on their sides. And then I heard a slightly more encouraging report that the helicopter had taken the crew off, but that the ship was on its side. And then after that, a friend of mine for the Evening Standard sent an aircraft out to have a look-see and called me and said, do you have any lights on the funnel of the ship? And I said, yes, there's a light points over the boat deck. And he said, well, the light's still on, which indicated to me the generator was still running, which gave me more hope. But I didn't seriously imagine we'd ever get the ship off the Goodwin Sands, and in fact we made a plan. Immediately the weather came down, we were going to send a shallow draft ship alongside and take off every item that we could unbolt or lift off the ship, such as the record collection, the studios, and heavy things like generators, until we'd stripped everything out of it that we possibly could.
The Ross Revenge was eventually pulled off the Goodwin Sands and towed into Dover, and it was claimed by the salvors. How did Caroline reclaim the ship?
I was surprised that Dover Harbour Board took on the salvage. But once the salvage had been agreed, they were honour bound to give it their best shot. And they ended up with 2 tugs trying to pull her off. And they succeeded on their last attempt, after which the rescue would not have been economically viable for them. And I imagine they thought they were rescuing a high-value piece of equipment. It wasn't until they dragged the poor old thing into Dover Harbour and realised, effectively, they'd rescued a wreck. Their first thought was to pitch the salvage fee at £120,000. And I had to negotiate with them for several weeks until they finally realised that we had no money. There was no commercial use for the ship. The ship was a wreck. That the best they could expect to get would be about the same amount of money that they would get had they seized the ship and sold it for scrap. And since it was more convenient to sell her back to me for the scrap value than to actually realise the scrap value, that's how we got her back for £20,000. But by that stage, we run up a bill of £6,000 for moorings, so effectively we bought the Ross Revenge back for 14,000 quid.
Why did the legal owners of the Ross Revenge not come forward at this time?
When a ship is salvaged, it's normal for the owners to make an appearance, either directly or electronically with the salvors and strike a deal. But obviously, in this case, nobody wanted to know. So someone had to front up to being at least the owner or a representative of the owner, because otherwise the vessel would have been impounded by the Admiralty Marshal, as Laser was the communicator. So I managed to get a letter from some solicitors in London indicating they recognised me and had acted for me on behalf of Radio Caroline, and that gave me some minimum status to negotiate with the Harbour Board, and that's been the situation which has existed all ever since.
Repairs were carried out by a group of volunteers throughout the year, and 2 broadcasts were made whilst in Dover Harbour with a restricted service licence, allowing the station to broadcast on very low power for 28 days. Towards the end of 1993, the Ross Revenge left Dover under tow for the River Blackwater in Essex. 2 further RSL broadcasts were made from this location, with ongoing repairs still being undertaken by the crew of volunteers.
Rolling Stones, I almost hear you sigh. Well, that's it from me. I'm away off back home again now. It's been great being back here again. And whilst I am here, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody on board for making this visit well, it was so good. I just can't explain. This is a song for all of them, and especially for Barry for helping me find my feet again, okay? I'll leave you with this one. This is Jefferson Starship and Miracles.
In August 1995, the Ross Revenge returned to the North Sea, with yet another RSL broadcast anchoring 2 miles off Clacton-on-Sea for 28 days. Why does Caroline operate nowadays as an RSL station?
The restricted service licence broadcasts are by no means ideal, but at least they keep the station operating and the support group relatively content until some better opportunity comes along, whatever that may be. Now, if you're going to ask me what is the future for Radio Caroline, it's not easy for me to tell you, because I really don't know what's around the corner. Clearly, we don't want to be a 1-month RSL station going around the country like a travelling circus, although we will do that for the time being if that's all we can get. What supporters want is an international radio station again. Now, I'm not such a Luddite that I believe that can only be done with an AM transmitter and diesel generators from a ship in the middle of the ocean. So the compromise is to retain something which is recognisably Caroline, and yet perhaps embrace the new technology which didn't exist when Caroline went on the air, such as satellite broadcasting, internet broadcasting, and all these other things. Because, as Chris Carey said once, and not that I agree with everything he says, but he said if the only loophole to have a radio station was to broadcast from the top of a mountain, it's not the mountain that's important, it's the radio station. So, without wishing to distress all the traditional supporters, obviously we have to retain our ship. We have to have as much freedom of broadcasting expression as we possibly can, whilst embracing new technology, and I think that's the way we will ultimately go.
The ship was dry docked in January 1996, allowing further repair work below the waterline, and that's the Radio Caroline story so far.
Another fantastic parts of the series we're running over the course of this weekend. 3 parts. Part 1 was yesterday, that was part 2.
and part 3 tomorrow night, which will take you through the present era of Caroline, I believe the 2000s up until today, some stuff from the recent years, and yeah, fantastic stuff. Nice to hear some familiar voices in there too, including Chris Pearson, who he said he was only 1 week into his Caroline journey in the clip featuring him there. I think he sounded better than he does this weekend. Thank you to Dave Foster, of course, as well, who unfortunately can't be with us this weekend, but he put all of that together, all 3 parts of it, and it sounds fantastic. So we'll kick off the hour with something for him, even if it is slightly overrun by a couple of minutes. But he says that's to blame Nick Jackson. It's his fault, so we'll blame Nick Jackson. Broadcasting on 648 and 1368 kilohertz across the Isle of Man on DAB, courtesy of Manx Radio, on smart speakers and around the world online. This is Radio Caroline North, where it's just after 7 o'clock. Thanks, Nick.
Radio Caroline North is sponsored by Feature Story News, provider of award-winning international news coverage for radio and TV stations worldwide. Find out more at featurestory.com.
Josh Holmes Bright. Close your eyes.